Hello, how are you over there? I hope you're doing great. So today we are going to look at our second topic of contract law, and that is the topic of invitation to treat, and we are going to juxtaposition it with the topic of offer, and we are going to try and draw a distinction between the two. So ladies and gentlemen, let's look at invitation to treat as differentiated from what amounts to an offer under contract law. So let's start with what amounts to an invitation to treat. There are so many definitions, but the one that I find more interesting is that an invitation to treat is an offer to receive an offer. Just that basic. And for purposes of that, for purposes of the definition, look at the Dictionary of Law, according to L.B. Carson's 6th edition, page 228. That is where you find that definition. So an invitation to treat, as we have said, it has many definitions, but one of them, the easiest, is that an invitation to treat is an offer to receive an offer. So where someone makes an offer to you, and they're inviting you to make an offer, that is, among many definitions, one of the simplest definitions of an invitation to treat. So let's look at some of the examples of an invitation to treat. The most common example are goods displayed on shelves in service stores, or also known as supermarkets. So when you enter a supermarket and you find goods that have been displayed, that is an example of an invitation to treat. For purposes of case law, please look at the case of Pharmaceutical Society of Great Britain versus Boots Cash Chemist Limited. It's a case of 1953, All England Law Reports, Volume 1, page 483. In this case, court held that the contract was formed when the goods were presented at the cash desk for purposes of payment, where the pharmacist was present, not when they were taken off the shelf. So in situations where you go to a supermarket or food store or any shop and you buy goods, what happens is that the contract is formed the moment you go to make a payment, okay, when you present them at the cash desk, where the person that receives them for purposes of receiving the money is found, and not when you pick them from the shelf. So this is a classic example of an invitation to treat. The other example are goods on display in a shop window. So when you're in your city and then you're walking around town and you find goods on display in a shop window, that is another example of an invitation to treat. Look at the case of Fisher versus Bell, 1961, Volume 1, Queen's Bench, page 394. In that case, the shopkeeper was charged with offering a flick knife on sale, of which it was displayed for purposes of sale, and it was categorized as an offensive weapon under the law. When they went to court, when he was charged for that offense, court held that the display that was made in the shop or in the window was merely an invitation to treat and not an offer, because the act provided that it's an offense for someone to offer or an offensive weapon for sale. So he was charged for offering it, and court held that actually he had not offered the flick knife, but rather the display of the flick knife was merely an invitation to treat and not an offer. The third example are goods or services advertised in newspapers or magazines. That is also another example of an invitation to treat. Look at the case of Partridge versus Crittenden. In that case, that's a case of 1963, Volume 1, Weekly Law Reports, page 1204. In that case, Crittenden was charged with offering a wild bird for sale in the newspapers, and court held that the advert wasn't an offer but an invitation to treat. So here again we are looking at a classic example of an invitation to treat. The fourth example are auctions. Auctions are also another example of what amounts to an invitation to treat. Kindly look at the case of Harris versus Nickerson, 1873, LR 8, Queen's Bench, page 286, that illustrates this aspect. In this case, the auctioneer withdrew items that he had advertised to sell on the auction, which Harris didn't find, and as such he sued. Court held, among others, that 1, an advertisement for an auction is an invitation to treat. That was the first principle that was established by court in that case. And court also went on to hold, among others, that when an auctioneer invites bids, it is not an offer, but rather an invitation to treat. So again, we are seeing in Harris versus Nickerson a classic example of that auctions are simply invitations to treat and they are not offers. The fifth example is an invitation to cancel tenants to buy their property. So here we are looking at a situation where there are tenants that are renting, let's say, for example, apartments owned by council or by a certain local city council of your area. So where an invitation is written to them by council to buy the property that belongs to that council, then that is simply an invitation to treat and it's not an offer. So the letter and application forms are always and merely an invitation to treat and not an offer. Again, ladies and gentlemen, look at the case of Gibson versus Manchester City Council, 1973, volume 1, Weekly Law Reports, page 294. For that case clearly illustrates what I am talking about. But briefly, in this case, the council wrote a letter to tenants, including application forms, and Gibson got one, offering to sell council houses to those sitting tenants that were renting them. On filing and handing in letters, he was not replied, so he filed and handed in the letters back to council, but the council, which is the Manchester City Council, did not reply him. So later on, they went to court, and court held that the original letter was an invitation to treat, and Gibson's filed letters were simply an offer. So again, this case is very illustrative on that fifth example. Please, it's very important to note, however, that in Storer versus Manchester City Council, a case of 1973, Volume 1 Weekly Law Reports, page 1403, that in the same circumstances, this case should be clearly distinguished. Storer versus Manchester City Council should be distinguished from the case I just discussed with you, which is Gibson versus Manchester City Council. So in Storer versus Manchester City Council, which were the same facts as above, court held that the agreement was binding where letters were clearly headed, open quotations, agreement for sale, and were signed by the plaintiff. So we are seeing here again court holding otherwise. So please distinguish these two cases, and I think the baseline or the point that differentiates the two is that in the second case, the letters were clearly headed, agreement for sale. Let's proceed to look at the sixth example, which is a mere statement of price. So statements of price, this is where a party simply puts forward the minimum price that they are willing to sell something. So where someone puts up a minimum price that they are willing to sell something, that is not an offer, but rather a mere invitation to treat. Let's look at the case of Harvey versus Fassi, a case of 1893, SC, page 552. So in this case, Fassi stated, open quotation, "Will you sell me your farm, Bumpy Hole Penny?" He asked a question. That was Harvey. And then Fassi replied, open quotations, "Lowest price acceptable is £900. Of course, there was a dispute where one alleged that the same amounted to an offer, and the other alleged that no, it was simply an invitation to treat. In the circumstances, court held that Fassi's statement was a mere statement of price, and it never amounted to an offer. The seventh example is the display of goods on internet sites. So where you find goods displayed on internet sites, the same simply amount to an invitation to treat and not an offer. Kindly go and research more and find a suitable case that will illustrate that principle. Then let's proceed to look at situations which are not invitations to treat. There are certain situations which do not amount to invitations to treat, even where certain persons may confuse them. I will give you a number of examples of situations which are not invitations to treat. The first one are unilateral offers. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, we had earlier looked at unilateral offers, and we said that unilateral offers are those that are made to the general public, and any party who any party who fulfills such terms of a unilateral contract would fully have a binding contract. Of course, for purposes of that, look at the case of Khalil versus Carbolic Smoke Ball Company, a case of 1893, Volume 1, Queen's Bench, page 258. The second situation, which is not an invitation to treat, is a statement of price with an offer. So earlier we looked at a statement of price to amount to an invitation to treat. But here we are saying that where someone makes a statement of price which also has an offer with it, then that cannot amount to an invitation to treat, but it's just an offer. Ladies and gentlemen, let's look at the case of Bings versus Boyd's Gibsons, a case of 1971, Volume 1, Weekly Law Reports, page 913. In this case, Gibbs wrote, open quotations, "For a quick sale, I will accept £26. The purchaser then replied, I accept your offer. Gibbons later replied in rejection of the contract and the alleged acceptance. Of course, there was a dispute. They went to court, and then court held that there was a contract. Ladies and gentlemen, again, please differentiate this case. I need you to distinguish Biggs versus Boyd's Gibbons from the earlier case that I shared with you, which is Harvey versus Fassi. Quite clearly, the distinguishing factor here is that in this case of Biggs versus Gibbons, there was a clear offer that was made where he stated that for a quick sale, I will accept £26,000, which was not the case in the first case that I shared with you of Fassi, where there was a statement that the minimum price acceptable is £900, meaning that he would only accept £900 and above, but he was not specific on the offer that he was willing to accept. So that is the distinguishing factor between these two cases. Remember, again, distinguishing cases in your exams is a very unique aspect which any student must learn from the onset. Let's proceed to look at a third situation which is not an invitation to treat. This is competitive tendering. So where there is competitive tendering, this does not amount to an invitation to treat. Where the tender advertisement clearly indicates the tender to be given to the lowest price, it's binding on that person who makes it and the person also who offers the lowest price. Look at the case of Havela Investments Limited versus Royal Trust Company of Canada Limited. This is a case of 1986, SC, page 207. In this case, Royal Trust invited tenders indicating the tender would go to the highest bidder. Of course, Havela made the highest bid and was denied the tender. Court held that there was a contract between Havela and Royal Trust. So I think you can see how this principle was applied in this case. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today. Today we have looked at an invitation to treat, and we have tried our very best to distinguish it from what amounts to an offer. Again, I invite you to subscribe to my channel, like my videos, and share with your friends. Thank you very much, and also don't forget to comment below. Make any comments on what you'd want me to discuss for you. Thank you very much, and have a blessed day.